Now let's talk about meal counting and claiming. So with meal counting and claiming, you have to claim the meal at the point of service. So a point of service count is the point in the food service operation where a determination can be accurately made that a reimbursable, free, reduced price, or full paid meal has been served to a student. It can be at the end of the line. Maybe we just have to make sure that the person at the end of the line knows that it meets meal patterns requirements, or that they gave them the right number of items based on offer versus serve. It has to be at some point in the meal service that it is identified as free, reduced, or full price. The count must be done daily, and you cannot have overt identification, as you cannot have anybody know if that child is free, reduced, or paid. You cannot do milk. There are certain things that you are unallowable at point of service. You can't have teacher count before the meal is even served. They can't be like, yeah, in my class, 20 kids are eating. We don't know that. Maybe some decided, maybe some left early, maybe some brought their lunch, but now they want to eat. Maybe some decided, no, I don't want to eat now. So you have to do it at the point of service when that child receives the reimbursable meal. You can't take it from any list generated in the classroom. It can't be based off attendance records. It can't be students signing a roster with no supervision. It can't be a tray count, and you can't use tally sheets. There must be a system in place showing a child did not go through the line more than once. So you have to have a computer software system or a student roster where you're marking off names. Again, it has to be when a child receives a reimbursable meal, because even though a child may got a meal, but it wasn't reimbursable, you can't claim it. So after the child receives a reimbursable meal, we have to know by name who received that meal, because you cannot have a child go through the line more than once. And if you're just doing, say, a tally sheet, you cannot ensure that that child did not go the line more than one time. Students cannot be forced to take a tray, including sites where all children are free. You cannot tell children if they do not want to eat, you cannot make them go through the line and get a meal. We have seen it before where kids literally came in, grabbed a tray, threw it in the trash, and left. You can't, if they don't want a meal, don't make them take a meal. Now, we have what's called an edit check. So you are required to have an edit check. You are required to claim based on the edit check. So an edit check is a comparison of each accredited site's daily count against data assist in the identification and correction of counts in excess of the number of reimbursable meals served each day. So all columns, we have one in our compliance section on page 50 to 51. All columns must appear. And we do have one, if you are doing it by hand, we do have one in other documents that is an Excel form that you can use. It will actually calculate certain things for you. You are required to have an edit check at breakfast and at lunch, and it is required for all sites, including if you're provision. What the edit check does, and I'm going to show you some examples. And again, we do have an example in the manual, but it's a comparison of how many meals are reimbursable that went through the line that day. And it also compares it to your attendance to make sure that you didn't claim more meals that were in attendance. You also have what's called an attendance factor. So it is required to have an attendance factor on your edit check. If you do not know how to get your attendance factor, there are ways that you can do it through the state website. We do have instructions for that. So if you go to attendance factor, if you go to the other documents, you will find attendance factor. How to get your attendance factor is also in the handouts as well. So it's very easy to do. You just have to do a little bit of calculating, which I think is one division problem. And then that is the amount that you will put on your edit check. And I will show you an edit check, and most computer software systems do have an edit check. Even the one that we have in Excel, there is a place for you to put in your attendance factor. This does have to be in there. If this column shows zeros, it's going to be a problem. We have to know what your attendance factor is. You can use what's called the highest state. You can use the highest attendance factor. You can use the state factor or the district factor. Most of the time, the district factor is going to be higher. So what the attendance factor is, and a lot of times it's in the 90 percentile. is it just shows on a daily basis on your average day, what percentage of students are attending school. So normal, I think this past year, the state attendance factor was 94.1%. So in here in the system, you put 0.941. That would be your attendance factor. It also is allowable to claim meals that go over the attendance factor. So there is a column in Edit Check, and it does compare it to your attendance factor. So let's just say, and I'll show you some examples, that you have 100 kids there and your attendance factor is 94.1, and it does take in consideration it takes the 94.1 in free, takes 94.1 in reduced, and 94.1 in paid. But it is plausible that you go over, you claimed more meals than what says your attendance, including your attendance factor. And we've seen it because maybe it's a chicken nugget day and everybody loves chicken nuggets. Or maybe that day, almost everybody attended school. You had very low attendance. I mean, everybody was there. You had a very high attendance. You had very low children not attending school that day. So most of your kids were there over your attendance factor, and most of those kids ate. And we have seen it. We've also seen it if you have very few reduced kids in your district. And it's easy to go over the attendance factor daily because you have so few kids that are reduced that you always go over your attendance factor. So it's not a big deal that you go over it, but if you do go over your attendance factor, you just have to notate why. Just let us know, was it chicken nugget day, that you had high attendance that day? Like why did most of the kids tend to eat? This is an example of an edit check. Again, we have this as a Excel form in other documents. So you have your site name, because you do have to have one per site. We have to know if it's for breakfast or for lunch, the month that it's for, because you do one per month. This is what you claim after. We have your attendance factor that goes right here. And then your total membership in the sum of column 6, 10, and 14, that total column is your total enrollment. So we have this column here, and mine's just a little bit fuzzy, which I know it is for you too. So this is column 5, this is the day of the month. This is column 6. This one is your highest eligibles. So you always add to this column. This column will always be added to. You never subtract from this column. So when it says what's your highest eligibles, whenever you're claiming meals, you'll use this highest number on the last day of the month. In number 7, this one you drop and add. So this one is just based on adds. Every time you add a child, you add the number here. And we do have instructions also in the manual as well. In this column is a daily reflection. So maybe one day you had 1 child that enrolled in the program. Maybe the next day you had 3 kids that did not, and they dropped the school. So especially some schools, when it comes to August time, this may be every day very fluctuant, or if you're a very large district, this could actually fluctuate a lot as well. So this every day will show a true reflection of the number of kids that day at the school. Then we have column 5, 6, 7, 8, and this is your daily free. This should go off of, I believe, your attendance factor. So this will be, it'll be your meals times your attendance factor. And then this is how many you claimed. So this is in this box right here, this box right here, and this box right here is what you claim meal-wise, your total meals for free. Then it's the same thing with the reduced, and then this is your paid information. So you always add here. This is, you never subtract. This is your highest eligibles. That's what you use for your claim. This is a true reflection of the number of kids enrolled in your school that day. You have by your attendance factor, and then what you claimed. And again, you do it for free, reduced, and for paid. And again, here you can make any notes if you do go over your attendance factor, and then you do have to sign it and date it each month to say that, yes, this is what I claimed, that this information is true and correct. If you have multiple eating sites, you do have to do an on-site review checklist. So it must be completed every year for every site. You do it one time before February 1st. You complete the lunch reviews for all sites. So if you have 10 sites for lunch, then you do all 10 sites every year. When it comes to breakfast, if you have 10 sites that have breakfast, you only have to do 50% one year. You can do 50% the next year. If it's an odd year, just do, you can do like Say if you have 9, you can do 5 in 1 year and 4 in another year. You do not have to do all of them for breakfast every year, just 50% at breakfast, but every year you do have to do lunch. So however many sites you have, you do have to do an on-site review for each one of those sites once before February 1st for lunch, and then 50% of the sites you can do for breakfast in that year. Again, all has to be done by February 1st. The forms start on page C56 for lunch and page C60 for breakfast for those on-site reviews. Now, for a food service management company, you do have to monitor a food service management company every year as well if you have one. So the food service management company monitoring is required per site, even if you only have one eating site. So even if you have one eating site, you still have to monitor the food service management company. You only have to do it at least one time per year. There's no date like on the other on-site. So the on-site review is because you have multiple eating sites, and that has to be done by February. Now, if you have a food service management company, this on-site review is because you're checking to make sure the food service management company is doing what they're supposed to be doing. Again, multi-site reviews and food service management company on-site reviews must be conducted by a district employee. You cannot have a food service management company monitoring the food service management company. And if the food service management company is over your county and claiming system, you cannot have a food service management company reviewing a food service management company. The district is making sure that the food service management company is doing what they're supposed to. And the district also is making sure that their school sites are doing what they're supposed to as well. So let's talk about if you're a school and you do provision and CEP. This is an alternate method of meal counting and claiming. We also do a 1-hour training, and it is up in OSD Connect right now. It's called What is Provision? And we go through what each of the provisions 2, 3, and CEP, what it is and when you can qualify, how you qualify, and how you sign up to do it. This is just a brief overview about provision and CEP when it comes to meal counting. So you are still required, if you're CEP or provision, you still take meal counts at the point of service. Meal counts do not have to be taken by type. So you don't have to be like, are you free, reduced, or paid? Because a lot of times you're not going to know anyway. You can no longer do tally sheets. We used to allow for tally sheets, but you cannot use tally sheets because, again, you have to ensure that a kid did not go through the line more than one time. So you either need a computer software program or you need like the student information system roster. You have to have something with the child's name on it and marked that this child went through the line, because if they want to come back through again, you can only claim 1 meal per child per meal service. You cannot claim more than that. So this ensures that you're not claiming more children than one in attendance, but that kids are not, you're claiming more meals per child than allowed. And again, a point of service count is not a teacher count before the meal is served. You can't bring a sticky note in and pay, like I have 10 kids that want this and 12 kids that want this. It has to be when the child actually receives a reimbursable meal. You can't use attendance records, like we had 30 kids enrolled today in class. You can't do that. You cannot use tray counts. You cannot use tally sheets. And you cannot have students signing a roster with no supervision. I've seen it where someone would put a roster with names on it and just set it over on a desk, and then kids could sign their name if they ate or not. You have to have someone monitor that, because I have seen children write their name down on somebody else's line, and you can't have that happen. You do have a modified edit check. You don't have to keep that big full one if you are on provision or CEP. And again, you cannot force a child to take a tray. If a child does not want to eat, you cannot make them go get one and just throw it in the trash. It is still required for a district too, even though you're on CEP or provision, you have to keep all your base year records. If records cannot be found, the district cannot participate in provision or CEP. It is very important. You have to keep base year. CEP, you are required to do a new base year every 4 to 5 years. Now on provision, you could be on the same base year for 20 years, and unless you don't have those your base year records. If you don't have those records, then you're going to have to redo your base year. And depending on the provision, again, you may have to reestablish and go back to regular counting and claiming if you can't find your records. You still have to fill out the low income report every year, and you still have to fill out verification report every year, even though you're on provision or CEP. These still have to be filled out. Now we have unpaid meal charge policy. So you do have to have a written policy that addresses situation where children participating in the reduced or paid rate and do not have money or cost to cover these meals. So you do have to have an unpaid meal charge policy. If you're a provision and you don't, or CEP and you do not charge for meals, you do just say that all kids are free and we don't charge. You still have to have just something. This policy must be provided to the state agency during an administrative review. A policy ensures that school food service professionals, school administrators, families, and students have a shared understanding of what is expected from them. You are required to provide this to students every year, and it has to be written every year. Now, you may give them something that says it's in the school handbook, if it's there, or maybe you have it online, but you do have to let them know every year what the charge policy is for your school district. Even if it's you don't charge, they do need to know what is going on at the district. Now, we did get some information later, but for the PLE, you are required to meet the PLE requirements. So for this school year, again, if you're in a negative balance, then by December 31st, 2021, you are required to meet the PLE requirements. If you need the PLE, you can reach out to Becky or to Karen in our office and they can send it to you. But if you were in a positive balance as of December 31st, 2021, you do not have to go by PLE to raise your rates. You can use the rates that you did for 2020. States may request to waive the requirements for the SFA to raise lunch in accordance with the PLE requirements. And again, this flexibility can help schools and families transition back into pricing. So you can use your pricing back from 2020. But if you were not in a negative, then you have to do the PLE tool, and then that will tell you what you have to charge for this upcoming year. But if you were in a positive as of December 31st, 2021, you can charge what you did in 2020 if you would like. And that has been the requirement here the last few years, is as long as you're in a positive balance by December 31st of whatever year it is, you're not required to raise your rates, but you still need to fill out the tool. But you are not required to raise your rates. We would tell you to fill out the tool because in case you ever do have to do it, the tool may have you go way more than what you need to. So we always say, and it'll be probably the same this year, is by December 31st, 2022, if you have to raise your prices for 2024.